Hi everyone, this is Erica Wood from the Hopkins County Extension Office, and I'm back with another video. And today I'm going to talk about these special house plants here, and these are the snake plants. They used to belong to the genus Sansevieria, and you probably will still see them labeled as that in garden centers, but I believe they've now been placed in the genus Dracaena. So a little bit of botanical confusion there for you. But when it comes to snake plants, a lot of people love these guys because they're a very easy house plant to take care of. And in fact, it's one that we label as our beginner plants too. And so when it comes to that with our beginner plants, the reason why we have snake plants is honestly they're plants that are going to thrive a little bit more on neglect and are kind of almost considered indestructible. Let's talk a little bit about snake plants today and what are some of the care tips required for them. So just to start off with, there's so many different kinds of snake plants that are around. Kind of the ones you typically see more of are these really tall vertical snake plants. And they're really great when it comes to adding them as part of decor in your home, although hopefully you're taking care of them if you consider them decor. But living decor, I guess you could say. But they're really great because they're nice statement pieces, whereas a lot of our other house plants may be more trailing plants or might be smaller in nature. We have these tall vertical snake plants that can really help to, add some texture, color to different parts of our home. So there are also other varieties of snake plants too. We have things like this one, which is considered a bird's nest snake plant, typically going to be a little bit more compact, and then it produces a ton of pups around it. And pups are kind of these, what we would refer to as these little offshoots that will come up out of the soil, these little offshoots that will form. And eventually, once they're big enough, you can separate these pups from the mother plant, easily divide them out, if you will, or you can leave them in there just to kind of fill up the pot as well. And then we have even smaller snake plants as well. Some like our sea star, our samurai. Those are some examples of our other snake plants that are out there too, that are relatively small and compact. Now, when it comes to care for snake plants, let's talk about that a little bit. So, as I mentioned, these are kind of stated as a beginner plant, almost indestructible. They can do okay in lower light conditions, like you can put them in lower light, and they'll tolerate for a period of time. I wouldn't recommend keeping them in low light for forever, basically. A lot of times when they're in low light for too long, the foliage can kind of look a little paler, might get a little tall and thinner, a little lanky, if you will. And it may even flop over. It may just not produce as many pups or as much growth. So if you want it to have kind of more stronger, durable growth, produce more pups for you, you're going to want to put it in brighter light. Really, these kind of act like a succulent in many ways, and so you can treat them like other types of succulents. And so you can put these in pretty much bright light and they're going to do well. Something like a west or a south facing window is perfect for these plants. They don't mind to have a little bit more of that bright, direct sunlight. They can tolerate lower indirect light, but as I said, if you want the ideal growth, give them that bright direct light, like a south or a west facing window is going to be great for them. And sometimes too, when you have them in bright light, they also may potentially produce flower stalks for you. It's a little bit more uncommon, but they do produce flowers, which are, these kind of stalks of these often white colored flowers on them. They're actually very pretty. Although a lot of times, again, we're kind of growing this more for the leaves, right? We're growing this more for the foliage. And I should say with the foliage, there's so many different colors and variegations out there with snake plants. It's wonderful. You have ones that have this kind of yellow variegation along the margins, and then you have others that are different stripes of kind of a pale and darker green color, ones that are a little bit more silvery green. There's just so many different cultivated varieties that are out there that you can possess. So that's another reason why a lot of people like to collect snake plants, because there's so many different types. And the foliage itself, again, could be more tall and vertical, could be shorter and more compact, might be even thicker or thinner, just depending on the variety that's out there. So it's a very, very diverse group when it comes to the different ones that are out there in the market, in the greenhouse industry, honestly. So we talked about light, let's talk about watering. You're not going to have to water these very often. Again, these are acting as a succulent, so you can let these dry out really well. And I would honestly recommend you let these dry out for a time. So a couple weeks may go by and you haven't needed to water your plants, and that's okay. So one thing I would say, if the plant has just been recently repotted, it may not need to be watered as frequently because it still has a lot of space to fill. But if it is in a smaller container where it's heavily root bound, and it's the roots are really sucking up that water quickly, then you may have to water it a tad more frequently. But again, it is very common to go several weeks without watering these plants. Wait till that soil feels really dry to the touch, to those first couple inches down with that potting mix. Otherwise, if this ends up staying too moist for too long, a lot of times you will develop very easily root rot diseases, and some of the foliage will rot at the base, and that can really cause, significant harm to the plant itself. So you'll want to avoid that. So again, this is where it's okay to kind of neglect your plants a little bit, where you don't have to be watering these every week. These are one of those plants you can leave on vacation for a period of time, and they're going to be just fine for when you get back. When it comes to things like humidity, you don't have to worry about so much with these plants compared to kind of the previous video where we talked about the Marantaceae family. These are going to do fine. Lower humidity it's really not going to phase them whatsoever. So don't even worry about that. When it comes to fertilizer, you're not going to need to fertilize these plants that much. Again, kind of think succulent. A lot of times whenever we're planting these in some type of potting mix, it may have a controlled release fertilizer in it, like granules or those little spheres that could be like yellow or greenish in color. And as it comes into contact with the water, those will slowly dissolve and that nutrients will be released into the potting mix. So a lot of times that might be sufficient. And really, I would say better to under-fertilize these plants rather than over-fertilize. You can give them like a succulent or a cactus fertilizer, if you will. You're not going to have to do that very often, maybe once a month during the growing season, if that. Again, these are plants that they're gonna do fine with not as much care. We briefly talked about propagation. So it's very common for these plants to produce pups, these little offshoots, and then it's very easy to divide those offshoots from the mother plant themselves, and that's how you can get new plants. But also you can easily cut the foliage themselves, take nice clean cuts of the leaves, and you can either water propagate those leaves or you can stick them directly in potting mix, and eventually those will develop roots, and over time they will produce shoots of their own. Only thing I would be mindful of, if you're propagating the leaves, it just may take them a little bit of time. Don't expect results immediately. Sometimes these could take several months for you to really see any kind of growth to them. But one thing I would mention, if you especially are propagating a cutting and you're putting it in the soil, after several weeks, just kind of lightly tug on it a little bit on that cutting. If you kind of feel a little bit of tension, then hopefully that means that it's developed some roots there. So, but otherwise, very easy plant to propagate, whether by pups or by leaf cuttings too. When it comes to other aspects like pests or diseases, you really don't see a whole lot of that. Again, overwatering can cause root rot diseases. That's number one. When it comes to other kinds of diseases, it's very common, I would say, to see some kind of fungal or bacteria leaf spot. Just avoid splashing too much water on the leaves, or when you're watering, just make sure you're watering the soil and not the actual plant itself. Just things like that. If you have it outside sometime and then you bring it indoors, sometimes they might be might be a little bit more prone to that than if they've been inside there the whole time. But I see a little bit of that. When it comes to actual pests like insects, I don't see a lot of issues here. Sometimes we may have some scale insect, or maybe potentially some mealybugs, but for the most part, these aren't well liked by our pests, and especially if you're buying healthy plants in the store, you're monitoring them and checking them for pests, then you can keep those populations down. If not, again, you can use something very simple like an insecticidal soap or neem oil, or if it's like, say, a scale insect, you can easily get like a wet paper towel and just kind of clean off the leaf and they'll come right off. It's just to help, again, keep their populations in check. But other than that, snake plants are just really easygoing house plants. If you are new to your houseplant journey, I would definitely recommend them, because they will, especially again, if you give it better light conditions, they'll grow for you and you will see those results, maybe growing a little more slowly, but they will reward you, and they're just very pretty to admire in your home. All right, I think that'll do it for today. Thank you all for watching.